What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to everybody's favorite podcast for all of their energy drink reviews and, of course, performance talks, the Bev Boys. I'm Brian,
I'm Christian.
and you might not know this, but we are the Bev Boys. And today, we got another banger. It's just a this is what we would like to call a staff episode, where it's just us. It's just the boys together. We're just hanging out. We got a couple of drinks. We got a couple of opinions. So I think it's time we pop some top and talk some shop.
That's right. And we got a hotel edition if you're tuning into the video version of the show. Usually it's just me that's in a hotel half the time, but now it's both of us. So it's very inclusive in that aspect. So
here we go.
Let's go. All right. Kicking us off. This is a drink I think we've had, but the branding looks a little bit different. So I got a C4 frozen bombsicle, but it's got like this, I don't know if it's because we're getting towards summer. It's kind of got, usually it's just that blue color, but it's got that like kind of bomb pop theme now. We know this is a great drink. Shout out to one of our players actually bought us some. So shout out to him. So I know I had to go with something I knew was going to be good. Frozen bombsicle C4. Let's get it rocking.
Hell yeah. Give a little swig on there. While you're there, you guys will notice I've removed a certain chair from the corner of my room.
Oh, that's funny.
We were playing some dice last night, so I had to move it out. But I think I'm going to keep it away from the corner. Do you got one of those?
It's not in the corner. I have a whole couch though.
Oh,
is that better or worse? No,
that's an upgrade. Did you see the one that was like, oh, there's a stage, and it was like a 2 steps onto like a platform?
Yeah, I have a chair. I have the other one I'm sitting in. It's also not really inside a desk, and then I have another one it's kind of on like the edge of a hallway, so not exactly a corner.
It's on the edge of glory.
Yeah, something like that.
I have a screaming cold can because I'm in Lexington, Kentucky for the NCAA East Regional. What is right next to the hotel but a Casey's?
Oh, yeah.
Haven't been to a Casey's in years. Yes. Now, what is asked is I tried to get the limited edition Casey's flavor of C4 that you had drank, and they didn't have it. But they did have this. The Rain Watermelon Sour Gummy.
Ooh.
Pretty excited. I mean, dude, the can is sweating. It's kind of hard. Let's turn the light on.
Oh.
Look it.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, that's just incredible. So, of course, the pink, the green, it looks sick. But, just absolute incredible. Good pop. Little vapor. Smells like the Sour Patch Kids, like little watermelon gummies.
I remember when they
taste like them too.
The sour gummy worm. That was all the rage when we were at Elon. It was.
I think we drank a case a week as the three of us that really hammered him, and Gabe did kind of hammer some every once in a while.
Yeah.
But it was like the three of us that hammered them.
Yeah. It was mostly me, you, and DeMarco.
And then every once in a while you'd see like Matt. Matt would be like, I got us like 15 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shout out Matt Law Jones. He did kind of set a standard. Matt kind of set a standard leaving Elon. Cam has left us, unfortunately, as well. He's on to greener pastures. Yeah. He's became the director at Belmont, so I think it's time to bring Cam on the show. But he did a Matt Law Jones move and came in with just 2 bags of energy drinks and was like, "Here you go, boys." So I feel like when you leave, you kind of have to do that.
Yeah, shout out to Cam, man. That's awesome. Definitely a loss for the staff, but he's definitely over-prepared for that role, and it's good to see him move on.
They could have given him $300,000, and they don't understand what kind of deal they're going to get.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the worst part is like he's that good. So, got a couple of topics today. Obviously, we love to talk about our friends. We love to see people in the field, honestly, just go thrive. And especially when they're good people, great coaches, or great coaches, even better people, to be honest. Plus, that guy got a hole in one. Again, it's his second one, and he got it at Cabot. Like, that's a beautiful course in Canada, man. This God, God, it's not fair. I know I'm like kind of worshiping him, but he's 6 foot plus, PhD, salt and pepper hair. He's got like the Doctor Strange thing going on, and he's a good guy. Like what? Basically a scratch golfer. This isn't fair. I'm done, but like it's not fair.
All right, on to our first topic now.
But Cam,
Yes, but Cam. All right, so something that I was thinking about, and obviously it was as it pertains to baseball, but this really pertains to all sports, is mobility in sport. Like, what is the role?
oh,
And I think a lot of times that, like a lot of things in like performance, fitness, S&C, all that stuff, there's people on both sides of the spectrum. There's people that think that like all mobility is like one of the most important things. It should be like prioritized above like everything else. It's like that they think that that's what's going to help like reduce risk of injury, enhance performance, this and that. And then you have people on the opposite end of the spectrum who are like, strength training is mobility. If if you're not getting hurt every day, like you have enough mobility, this and that. So, and as we know with a lot of these things, the answer often lies somewhat in the middle. I think it's a little bit different, obviously, for different sports. And I think I've been thinking about this because my mind is like changing a little bit in terms of before I was more on the side of, okay, like if you have enough mobility to like play your sport, that's probably the mobility you need. Like if you're not like just getting hurt, like if you're like have enough mobility to do the sporty movements you need to do, whatever you're playing baseball, basketball, football, this and that, okay, it's probably enough. But as I've been working in baseball a little bit longer, I think about like this exactly. So like, for example, if you take me and then all of our players, like I'm probably like if we look at just like the big three lifts or any like weight room lift, I'm probably the strongest on the team. Like I'm stronger than all the players. That's not me toot my horn. That's just like I'm a meathead. I don't play sports anymore. I just train. So why can't I throw a baseball very hard? Like some of these guys, doesn't matter, they may not be very strong weight room wise, but they can throw a baseball, 90 to 100 miles an hour versus me. Like I could probably throw a baseball like 70, 75 miles an hour on like max effort. I
and
think
it's
part
not
of it
going
has
where
to
you
have,
want it to.
exactly. Yeah. I don't know where the hell that thing's going. So I think obviously it's multifaceted. Like I'm not just going to say that all mobility is the thing that's like holding me back. But I think it's one, baseball is very skill dominant. Like throwing as a skill is very, it's not simple. But I've been thinking about like, oh, like maybe I just don't move. My body doesn't move in the same way that these guys like bodies move. And that's because I haven't like thrown my whole life, this and that. But just kind of want to open the floor for what do we think like mobility plays? And maybe you can relate this back to football and track, which are both very different sports from like baseball. Track kind of being obviously like there's definitely a skill to running, and then football being like a sport where I tend to think that like obviously you want to have technical and tactical prowess, but like physicality is without it, unless you're like at a few select positions on the field, like you're not doing well. Like you have to be physical in order to even be competitive.
Yeah.
So what role does that play? And does it depend on, it depends on probably the body part too. Obviously, like lower half is probably going to be a little bit more important for a track sprinter. Obviously, like with baseball, I'm thinking more of like elbow, shoulder, and like spine are the three things that come to mind for me.
Mhm. I think there's an argument in something that you said, and that's like baseball is very skill dominant. is at what point I feel like so much of everything is all encompassing, right? It's everything everywhere all at once at the same time. Is mobility part of the skill? You know what I mean? Like there is a skill to throwing faster. There's a skill to throwing harder, but at some point within that skill set, they're learning to find the different shoulder and elbow positions where they release. And it's like, if you're not mobile, you probably can't develop the skill as well to your fullest capabilities, right? And I think we've always classified mobility as like being able to produce force in an extended range of motion, right? That's not just, hey, I can pull my hand all the way back behind my head. It's like, no, I can unassisted kind of get that there. Now with a baseball, like technically that's like assisted because you have the weight of the ball, whatever. But in a sense, it's, you know, let's look at like a pitcher when we're kind of going on there. It's like, look at a pitcher's hips when they're actually like going through that, they're able to essentially just create torque around their spine, right? They're able to loosen up that T-spine, get that going, the elbow, all of that kind of goes into it. And I think of it like, you know, and I hate to be on this because I've obviously like, we know that golf is now like so much of my personality, but like you look at like a golfer, look at Rory McIlroy taking a drive or Bryson DeChambeau versus like some of the other guys. They have so much more distance on their ball because they're able to fully like have like a higher 90 to 45% ratio of where the hips and like shoulders turn because they can like fully extend it all the way back there in like a straight arm fashion and have that like bigger range of motion to create that lever to create the momentum. There's a limit to I think there is a limit of if I'm here, how fast I can get it to go there. Right? At a certain point, when I want it to go faster, I'll need to increase a little bit of range on that, like the movement itself to create more speed. And that's where my belief would be that the mobility would play a key role within the skill set, right? The skill set is not just throwing hard, but can I throw hard accurately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I was like throwing a dart with just my wrist right here at a 10-foot away dartboard or 12 feet, I can probably hit a bullseye. But you back me up to 30 feet, I'm probably going to have to go from here to the elbow getting involved. Might be a little less accurate until I train it enough to where that skill becomes a thing, right? And then if you back me up to 40 feet or 50 feet to try and hit a bullseye, I'd have to train a lot more and develop the skill of like almost like a tomahawk throw. And that's where I'm starting. That's where I'm kind of like on this kind of hyperbole is that the mobility sets like the requisite for the output, I think. And then the skill is enveloped around that of I'm going to place it where I want to within the box. And then I want to have the ball curve by where I'm placing my fingers on this. But the output itself, just how fast you go over a distance, right? The distance will increase, the speed will then increase, etc., all the way through. I do think that plays a large role with like, especially within like the terms of like baseball. And then you kind of like, you can relate this back to like track and field, football in a different sense. Like football is it's a very hip dominant sport, to be honest. Like if somebody's not able to get in proper positions to create leverage, you're likely like a very stiff athlete who can't hinge properly at the hip and create like a hip flexion to violent extension is not going to be very good. Same vice versa. If you're a defensive back, if you're not able to disassociate your shoulders from your hips and have like a hip turn and be able to do like a crossover run with somebody, that's going to inhibit some of the skill. And then track and field, how much can you have unilateral flexion with extension? That I think that's a very big thing. and that will influence the skill of which they run. You know, 10, 10 meters about 1.2 seconds, so give or take 10 to 15 meters depending on who it is. That's where like max speed is. After that, like the neurostimulus of coordination can play a role into when people start to quote unquote like kind of fall apart at the ends of a race because they can't sustain that, right? And that's because maybe the body is getting a little bit more tired trying to get into those positions, and it can no longer sustain that output to get that skill, right? So it's almost like there's a very blurred line where the skill itself are like, oh, they don't look like they're very good, they're not very skillful in holding it together. It's like, well, there's probably a physical component that's making it more difficult to withstand those outputs within the quote unquote like the biomechanical model of what is probably efficient for them. And that's where I think in those kinds of examples that I've stressed just now, I think that's where mobility plays a either promoting or limiting factor within the skill, not even just acquisition, but like skill expression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I always like come back. Obviously, like I said, there's people who view this at like the extremes, but I kind of always come back towards the middle of like, okay, it's important to have like the requisite range of motion, but if you don't have like strength throughout that full range of motion, it's not quite as
Doesn't
effective.
matter.
Like this is why like people that do like Pilates or yoga like are super like pliable. They can get into crazy ranges of motion, but they don't have like a lot of strength through that range of motion. I would argue because they're just like the whole and like obviously I haven't done a lot of yoga or Pilates. I've done it a little bit, but from my understanding, it's a lot about like relaxing into super deep ranges of motion. You're not really focusing on putting like force through those ranges of motion. So you can kind of relate it to when people say like, okay, we need to sprint and then lift heavy and the stuff in the middle, like you'll probably get a little of that through the rest of your training, but you really want to train both ends of the spectrum in terms of like force and velocity. It's kind of the same thing. You can look at it with like mobility. Like, yeah, you probably want to be able to relax into really deep ranges of motion, but you also need to be able to put force through those ranges of motion via like traditional resistance training, whatever mode that you deem best. And another interesting thing too is you can have a lot of people that, like for example, if you were to do like your typical like table range of motion test that like a athletic trainer or physical therapist would do, sometimes you'll see athletes who they don't get into because that's passive range of motion, right? Like someone else is manipulating your joint. They don't get into like the same range of motion on like a table test, but then when you see them in their sport, they get into way deeper ranges of motion. One, because it's like active, and two, because it's like baseball specifically, like whether it's a pitcher during like a delivery or a swing, like that's something that they've done like so many times, and it's like very skill specific, like it's very task specific. It's interesting to me that like you don't see that like on the table test. It is and it isn't. Like, is that something to be like worried about? Like if they can get into it like actively but not passively? I don't know. That's something, because it's some people might say like, oh, like he's lacking whatever hip IR, but then when you see him on the mound, they get plenty of it. It's like, okay, why can't they do it passively, or vice versa? Like they have a ton of passive range of motion, but they're not able to access it during like the sport. And I think
I,
that's probably a case where if you have it like passively, like someone else can manipulate you into that position, but you're not able to really get into it in the actual skill. Maybe that's where you need to do a little, like you have the ROM. Maybe you need to do a little bit more like targeted, like area specific, like strength training in that range of motion so that you feel more
yeah.
comfortable. Because obviously, like if you're, I can get whatever my arm all the way back here, but if I'm not like comfortable, like throwing a baseball as hard as I can back there, I'm not going to throw very hard.
I think the latter of the two is more problematic because that means they really don't have access to it within their own free movement. and they can't get themselves into that position or get themselves out of that position. Whereas the prior, I think, people like, I think potentially like an AT may see that and go, oh my gosh, like something's wrong. They don't have this. They need more IR. But it's like, okay, but they may need IR in a supine position where they're not able to interact with the ground, right? Sports are ground based, and in almost every sense, there's going to be ground reaction forces. It's from ground based up, and the 3-dimensional patterns. So like that kind of goes back to like principles of programming. It's like if you can see them operate within this realm, and like you said, you put them on a mound and they're able to fully have a wide range of external rotation to massive internal rotation or vice versa. You look at that and go, okay, well, they do have it. They just don't have it without the environment. I wouldn't look at that and go, that's a big problem. I think that's when you have to use, not to kind of go Dan Path on this, but it's like that's when you use your coaching eye versus like whatever the spreadsheet says of the data that was filled in versus, the movement screening. Now the latter, like I said, I think that's one that creates a problem. If they're able to get into very big passive ranges of motion via assistance or even on their own, but you put them on the mound, I think there's definitely a skill. I mean, it's definitely a skill based issue, but at the same time, there's a contextual problem that I think you would need to solve, and it's why can't you do that same movement or that same rotation in this setting where your feet are planted and you're able to kind of push away from the ground? Like, do you have like a quote unquote a contextual strength problem to push that in, or in a sense is it a psychological issue? Or the final piece, when you kind of do that is like in a sense, you look at like if I put you on a table and your legs are just underneath your hips and you can do it fine. But then, in some of the states, like watch a pitcher, their legs widen a ton. Is that the issue? Is you don't have like structural components within the muscular system or the tendons or whatever it is to where when you widen out, same thing, like some people have a lot more problem when they squat the depth going sumo, or like a wide squat versus like a narrow squat. Is
Right.
that one of those issues that we now need to look at?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like I said, the latter plays, I think, a more difficult piece in this puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. You have someone that's just like super like lax, but they're not very strong. I would rather have someone that's neither is ideal, but like probably I'd rather have someone who's like pretty damn strong, but a little bit more like quote unquote stiff.
Yeah.
Neither are ideal. I think like obviously you want like good range of motion, but like still being like strong throughout that range of motion. Because I know like thinking back to took a like an FRC FMS type of course, and they're
Mm-hmm.
big on like okay like what they're like you can't. Their big thing is like okay, one of the big things is like you can't move or you can't move. Like your range of motion is your range of motion right now, and like okay, want to work to like improve that, but obviously like that's where I kind of got the yogi example. Like you don't want to just be super a ton of range of motion, but no like neuromuscular like control through it. Like you want to be able to like put force through your joints and like have control of that range of motion and be strong in all the ranges that you do have. You'd rather be strong in all the range that you do have rather than have a ton of range and only have control over whatever 60% of it, because then that 40% is probably where you're more likely to get like injured if you get into that position and you don't have like a lot of like resiliency or like you never put like force through it in that range. So um yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's my blabber for mobility. But it's I don't know, it's super interesting just because I was thinking I'm like, damn, like I'm stronger than like all of these guys, but I throw slower than all of them. And obviously like it's very like skill dependent. Like um but yeah, it was just kind of interesting to think about. Another thing that kind of made me think was in baseball specifically, well with pitching and with hitting too. You see people they have there's not like, okay, like one batting stance that like a lot of people hold. Like a lot when you're playing like t-ball or little league, like they're all going to teach you the same way, but then when you get into, higher levels, everyone has a slightly different approach, whether it's, pitchers, the way they deliver the ball, or hitters, the way that they like set up in their swing. Contrast that with like sprinting, and this is like a good question for you. Why does it seem like a lot of people think that there's one like quote unquote like ideal way to like sprint and to have like running look, you know, and like it's not that way with like other things, like a basketball shot with a baseball throw, because they're all different skills. Like running is a
Yeah.
skill, pitching is a skill. Is it simply because there's people that throw sidearm really hard, there's people that come three-quarter slide, there's people that come over the top really hard? Is it because, it's kind of known that like, okay, this like general like give her plus or minus 10%, this running form is just best biomechanically? I want to hear your take on like why that seems to be a little bit more rigid in terms of like, okay, the standard for good sprinting form is a lot different from a standard from good, quote unquote good throwing form, or just you can take any other sport and any technique.
Yeah. I think there's kind of two components here. Number one is how much does throwing form get researched in a traditional clinical sense or, whatever it is versus like sprinting. There's sprint labs in a sense to where, you look at like SMU or not, is it SMU? I can't remember where
Yeah,
Derek
I think
can,
so.
yeah, where they're literally on a treadmill with the dotted pants and like going through that. And I think that gets so published that people just try to fit a square peg into a round hole versus, and then on the other aspect of it, sprinting is always like viewed as less, even in track and field, it's less of viewed as like a true art form or like a skill set to it's an exercise, you know? There's a couple different ways to probably front squat, but like you kind of want it to always look like this kind of thing. And
Well,
I
and with
think
a certain bandwidth,
yeah,
like I said, like plus or minus 10%, like
yeah. And I think they try to get so towards that. And that's just not the case, because there's so much different variance in what is it? Yeah, obviously, the speed itself is stride length and stride frequency. Maybe someone's a very like length dominant person. That's going to look way different than, great example, Christian Coleman, 60-meter world record holder. His race looks so much different than Usain Bolt in 100 meters. Two completely different anthros, two completely different kind of like velocity, like tracking, like down the track, and two completely different things. Now, one's a world record holder in the 100, one's a world record holder in the 60. That plays a part to it. But I also like think like Christian Coleman's 5'7" and Usain Bolt is like 6'3". Those are way different. Just the body anthros, like the limb length versus the torso length, the how long is their tib, the Achilles length, like all that plays different. And everyone it just assumes like because you're sprinting, there's this archetype that you have to fit. And I think that's where like the failure is. And I look at like the microcosm of like my team alone, our best 400-meter performance that we had, somebody would look at this athlete and say, oh, well, there's like a big like pelvic tilt. And it's like, yes, but like she's not foot striking way out in front of her and she's not super backside. She just typically has a pelvic tilt. Now I can try to get that to be reduced, but it's also like, why not optimize that particular athlete model? I think there's positions that you want to see. And I think seeing those positions on a specific athlete versus saying you have to look like this are two different things. Um, if they can strike underneath the hip or like the 2 centimeters in front of the hip, they can get the proper hip flexion and disassociation to get extension on the other leg. And we see like movement at like the shoulder girdle alongside on the contralateral sling, right? Bunch of word salads essentially to say like, if we can see these like 3 to 4 things, I don't think it has to be you have to look exactly like XYZ. Um, but I think I believe it's like, hey, we have so much research on this, and so the problem with research is, and Josh, when he was on here, he kind of mentioned this, like the articles that we're seeing are already 5 years old by the time that they're to the public.
Mm-hmm.
But so we're just heavily relying on more or less kind of outdated research. Um, and people just everyone wants a quick bullet. They don't want a gray area. And I think we've talked about that to a fucking massive extent on this show. But if they say, if I get you to look like that, you're going to be faster. So they just chase that dragon so hard versus like, this is going to be a little bit of a more like complex problem that I have to work with. And I want to work that, which is why I start to think like when you see those coaches who they have those athletes that they don't look biomechanically perfect or something's just kind of amiss. It's like, but they're performing fast. And then everyone will go, well, what if, it's the Usain Bolt argument of like, what if his start looked like this? Then he'd have been even faster. Well, that's not really the case because his start looked like that to set up the back half of the race, which was his better half.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you need to look at it in these like very, I'm trying to think of the word, which is messing me up right now, but it's those one-off situations or those like very context specific situations that are more important. Those N of ones. Exactly. That's where you need to live versus, and that's really hard in an 80-person session if you're training football,
Mm-hmm.
and the world of track and field. I got 10 athletes, a little bit easier to kind of like pick that apart and say, like, I want to be very specific. But in the same thing with football, it's like, well, we all have to look like this. Well, you don't, because a lineman's going to run very differently than a wide receiver. You got a 180-pound, like 6'1" guy who's very wiry, but super fast. He's going to run so much different than your 320-pound guard.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to have the bandwidth, but I think it needs to be extended. I don't think it has to be within 10%. I think it should be in that 2025. And it's like, do we get you to look the way that you feel comfortable you can produce? And we reduce your risk of injury, right? I think the outliers, when you start to see like somebody getting super backside or overstriding, that's when I'm like, okay, we got to reel that in. But if they just run in this particular form, okay, how do we get that to be the most productive thing without like completely ripping the wiring out of a house and renovating it? Like, can we, in a sense, can we just kind of put some new fascia boards on it and make it look good for a resale?
Yeah, that's like a good question. Is like when do you make at what point do you make an intervention? Like specifically like if a guy has like okay form, not the greatest, but they're really fast, do you try to intervene to say like oh that can make them faster? Because sometimes that can work, but sometimes like
It can backfire.
it can be like yeah you can get them in their head and like mess them up.
Yeah, I
I don't
think.
know. Is like I think if it's like I've seen it before where it's like don't have fast guys that do have like a history of like injuries, like soft tissue injuries specifically, then I think that's like a more obvious point to like intervene and look a little bit more at the mechanics. Like, oh, he's backside. Like that's probably like a pretty likely factor in like why he's been hurt. Okay, let's try to fix something. But like if they don't have a history, or if they have a history but their running form looks good, that's probably not one you see very often.
Yeah.
But what do you do? What do you do there? Is that just like a strength issue? Is that a like volume issue of like I don't know.
I think that's
Where the point of intervention is what like interests me. Like when do you intervene? And it probably depends on the sport, obviously too. Like your form matters a lot more when you're an actual like sprinter, and that is the sport. Versus I mean, a lineman, you obviously need to sprint, but you never really need to open it up for more than like 15 yards on a play. Baseball, a little bit different depending on the position. Like if you're a
yeah.
catcher.
even in football, like you see like a wide receiver at DB, a lot of the times like they're never like
Never
upright.
upright full speed unless it's a
Yeah,
once in a game. Yeah.
there's
How many
there's
times do
like
you see an 80-yard play a game?
now I think you should expose them to that in order to make sure that that's not the first time they ever encounter it. But I don't think it should be like the marquee training modality that you go after, um, just because it's not.
No gassers.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, there is like the injury history with somebody who has bad form that plays a role. Now, like you said, the weird kind of anomaly is the guy who had or the athlete who has really good form but doesn't have but doesn't have like a clean injury card in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you kind of start to pull your other data that hopefully you have around you to help inform you, like what is your player loads on your GPSs, what is your volume that you're training at, you know, show me some of the strength numbers. I think those do play a part, and if they do, it's maybe not the traditional like, okay, well, his back squat's very high. It's like, okay, but what's getting injured? Is it a hamstring? Is it a quad? Because if it's not the glute and the quad, it's probably not your back squat, right? If it's a hamstring, is it proximal? Is it distal? Where is it? Is it towards the inside? Maybe that's an adductor thing, and then you start to look at, well, he looks good upright, but if you're looking from the front or the back and you see him, kind of widening his base a ton when he accelerates, and he's kind of like swaying side to side, like that might be an adductor issue. So I think there's like, it's such a sprinting is a very, very simple thing, but it's so complex in the aspect of there's a multifaceted list of things that go into it that you have to kind of like run through like a Rolodex of like a 50-point check of, okay, this looks good, but he's getting hurt. So like, I need to look here. And then like, you look like Charlie Day from the Pepe Sylvia episode of Always Sunny, where it's like, it's Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. Like the lines are connected in so many various
Yep.
ways. And it's like, that's where like one thing is like, we talked about like the expertise where people will claim to be an expert and I can make you fast. It's like, okay, but anyone can make anybody fast. Number one, you give them 3 weeks of high speed training, they're going to get faster. Can you sustain that? And can you sustain that with volume over a long period of time? That's a fucking hard thing to do. That's where like a lot of like track coaches will get into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa. That's where like a lot of like sports performance coaches can get into trouble because like they'll hit these like massive speeds like week 2, week 3 when they're kind of fresh and they're kind of starting ripping some fly stuff or whatever it may be. That by end of summer they're beat up and they can't do this, and now they're going into the most important piece, which is camp, into the first game, and they're dinged up. They have soft tissue injuries because
Didn't
we
put
didn't
in that
have
base.
we didn't have everything encompassing around that. That's why I say like it's really fucking easy to make somebody like faster. It's really
Yeah.
hard to make them sustainably faster.
Yeah. I would just I mean, you just want to be faster, just do nothing but take all the other training out, just sprint, and like I bet
And
if I did
sprint,
that for like 2-3 weeks,
you're
and
gonna you're
eventually,
you'll make a gain.
yeah, but will I be able to sustain that? Probably not. That's like we
Exactly.
were talking about it on the one of our previous episodes about like, well, if sprinting's the best like stimulus you can get, why don't we like just do that? And it's like I look at that as like the top of like the like if you don't have the foundation, like the bottom will fall out from under you. And if you like think if you only maxed out, like we know that like maxing out isn't really what builds like strength. That's just
Yeah.
more so like an expression of like max strength. Most strength is actually built at like submaximal loads. Like
Hmm.
even like like not even like I'd say like 70 to like 85%. We know that like a lot of your training will happen in that like 70 to 90% range. Rarely are
Hmm.
you going to go over like 85, 90% in training, and you just can't do it for a long period of time because building strength is a little bit different than expressing strength.
Yeah.
Same thing with
And
speed. Like building
I
speed is different. Like an expression of speed, like I can rip a 40, but like one, that takes a lot of stress out of my bucket that I can't allocate to other things versus like, okay, maybe if I allocated that a little bit differently, I wouldn't see the result right away. But longer term, which is what matters for pretty much everybody, longer term, I'm going to see better results, and those are going to be more sustainable results.
I think so too. And like we've talked about kind of like the fitness argument of like sprinting, and it's, we have the feed the cats model, which I think when someone's like a younger athlete, it doesn't have to be just necessarily like they're a 13-year-old, but maybe they have a very low training age. Sprint, rest, feed the cats. Like I think that works. The deeper and deeper I've gone into this, the more I understand and the more I've grown to be fond of like the fitness as it's kind of quote unquote like named, or like the aerobic development plays such a massive role in this. Number one, able to clear the hydrogen, like rebalance the pH level within the muscles, like biochemically fantastic in order to support sprint training. In the other aspects, it's upright rehearsal. So it's very important to repeat that gait cycle and ingrain movement patterns over and over and over again. Number two, the longer the distance, the more time it is. The more time, you're probably sliding into different energy systems, right? You can't just train ATP PCR and expect somebody to run a 55-second 400. Good fucking luck. Have fun. The other aspect too, that I just don't, the rate of decay. We talk about speed reserve so much, and it's like, hey, if your top speed is 20 miles an hour, but you can only operate at 80% of that, that's 16. That's awesome, but that's assuming the same rate of decay at this like 3% for everybody involved. That is not the case. You look at an 800-meter person versus a running back. Their rate of decay for speed reserve is completely different because of the aerobic fitness. Now, the running back more than likely probably has a higher output, but they're probably going to be able to operate more so at 70% than that 80, 85 during the same amount of time, because their rate of decay on that speed or ability to kind of exasperate or exude that output is just faltering because they don't have what the fitness is in order to sustain that. That's where like the aerobic training, or like that base that they kind of mentioned, or like the foundation of this pyramid, that's where that falls out and everything comes tumbling down, because they just don't have that. They don't have the fitness to sustain that output. Which, kind of going back to where I was talking about, I've really started to grow fond of like developing those things around that. And they support that. It's the same thing as like, track and field doesn't need repeat sprint ability, but it's a damn good thing. And there's a reason it's a damn good thing, right? If I can have repeat sprint ability, either, the Hansen 10x10 method or repeat sled pushes, now I'm able to extend preparatory periods in a competition environment, and I can get a lot more juice, right? We've started to see, since adding some of these things within our system, our third, fourth rep is our best rep, right? Which is great, because now there's less stress on the athlete when they're in a competition environment. Why is that? Because now I can say, hey, let's hit some 30 meters out of blocks to get ready. Oh, you're at a 17 heat 200 meter at a fucking open meet. Great. Now I can have you hit some of the stuff while you're waiting, and you're not being so scared to get tired that you don't do anything. Now you get cold and you have a bad performance. There's so many like different aspects that go into this play, which I think, kind of going way back to our original argument of like, why is this kind of like a one size fits all approach? I just truly believe like it's very dogmatic in the sprint space. I think coaches love to be, the expert on this. And when they're the expert, they become more and more dogmatic. And I think that's what we've really started to see, is that it's like my way is the best way. My way is the only way. And then you have just the two opposite ends. Even if we go back to the two of the biggest names that kind of really push sprinting in collegiate, that wrote the books, you have a Clyde Hart model and you have a Charlie Francis model. Charlie Francis, short to long, Clyde Hart, long to short. both kind of, crossing paths somewhere in the middle of the season, but then going to the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. When in reality, that middle ground is like where you should live, right? Maybe your aerobic development is a little bit more long to short, and then the sprint development is short to long. Why can't that be a thing, right? Do the slower stuff for a little bit more and a little bit longer, really develop the capacity, and then hammer that short to long, like longer rest periods, etc. And then just be cognizant of where the total volumes are, make your progression and go with it. But no one wants that, because it's not a plug and play black and white answer template, whatever it is. And it becomes a knowledge problem versus a athlete issue. And I think that's where things become difficult. If it's on the coach, which I think a lot of coaches, and I've started to really see this in my piece of the field, a lot of coaches don't love the fact that they may have failed an athlete. And it's a very hard thing to do. And it's a very hard thing to tell yourself and have that conversation with the athlete as well. Where I think I could have done this better or this or that, because then they show the weakness of I'm not a genius. And they would rather say, well, the athlete doesn't try or whatever it is, or they don't do this. It's always something else. And athletes on the same realm, they can be like, oh, it's always something else, that it's never, I just didn't do what I was supposed to do. No one ever wants to just look in the mirror and go, fuck, I blew that. The more you do that, the better off you're going to be. And the more you do it, the more easier it becomes to become more objective about those things and less like ego attached, right? Not to be like Joachim. It's like, hey, do shrooms and just detach your ego. Like,
Sometimes you need it though.
I mean, yeah, he can do it, but like, if you can do that a little bit, it becomes very easy to just become far more objective around those areas.
Yeah, it's kind of like a messed up like paradox of like the more you do that, the better you get, but like you have to go through that discomfort of like knowing and accepting that sometimes you act like an idiot, and we're all kind of idiots, just to different degrees and different willingness to acknowledge it. But the goal is just to get like less wrong over time. No one's right.
I think so. It's difficult.
Yeah,
and
it's definitely hard. I feel like it's probably harder to. I would assume it's harder too. Like the more you go on too, and like you have successes too, and like we tend to remember like the good things more than the bad things, so then it's like, all right, like in your mind you have this stack of like proof of like, okay, this is why I'm a good coach or good at whatever. So then when you do something that's like not the smartest, or like where it was kind of like your fault or your responsibility, it's tougher to be like, oh, because you think like, oh, like I have this whole track record of me doing good. You almost like, it's harder to think like, oh, you can still mess up. But that's when it's like it's like the irony is like, that's when it's like the most important to be able to like
look at it and exactly. Yeah, it's such a difficult thing, and it's a very uncomfortable thing. I think humans as an organism, the human nature is to find comfort. Like we look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's to find that peace, that comfort, that sense of security. And when you have those like difficult conversations of fuck, when did I mess up? It kind of pushes you down there. So you fight to get back up to it. And so you just try to forget about those wrong things or those things that you may have screwed up on. Whereas, the people who kind of reach the tip of the pyramid of spiritual enlightenment, they're able to kind of go up and down to find that spiritual enlightenment, which that's its own podcast that I think we could dig into. But
yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a self-serving bias, and like we could do a whole podcast on like just biases and like fallacies, heuristics that like all humans fall prey to, but like that's one of them, is like not I can't remember what the one is. Like you're very critical of like everyone else, but then like when you do the exact same thing in like the same context, you're like, oh, but like it's different with me because of this. Like
Yeah,
you always find an excuse for yourself. It's kind of like funny. It's funny, but like we do it all the time. It's funny to like think about it. It's like that's not logical at all. But in the moment, you're like, oh, but like it was harder for me because I had this, and this, even though like you don't know shit about how the other person like came to their conclusion.
yeah. It's almost like the I can't remember what the heuristic is, but it's like the preacher, the prosecutor, the politician, and the scientist, right?
Yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
prosecutor is going to be like, "Oh, you screwed up. You're just poking holes in everything." The preacher wants you to be kind of like he wants to tell you why he's the best, and then the politician wants you to be on his side, and then the
Mm-hmm.
scientist is like, "Well, maybe it's all three, and we're kind of all wrong, but we're all a little right. And who's got the best piece on this? And then we'll kind of put it together." We want to get
Right.
to all being the scientist,
Right. But that it's tough because that one takes the most effort, and you actually have to like
be cognizant
slow
of it.
down. Yeah, stop, slow down, and actually like think.
Think again, one might say.
Yeah. Yes.
Go
Yeah.
check out our
Go
book
check it
review.
out. Yeah, that's right. No, it's funny. It's funny. It's like we're so like everything's like so advanced now, especially like compared to even like 100 years ago. But like
Hmm.
we still have the
Issues.
same brain. Yeah, it's crazy to me like how rapidly we can like improve like technology, like food, like literally everything. But like our brains are still like fundamentally like the
Errored.
same with that kind of stuff, just because like that stuff changes so slowly. Like it's instinct. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Like I think we're closer to like a caveman's mindset than we are the like true like the idea of enlightenment as an entire human population. We're closer to the
Yeah,
Stone Age than we are to, whatever
right.
the next two steps are.
Because it really is. It's the same mindset. Just we don't realize it because it's in the context of
Our
twenty
current
first
environment.
century.
Yeah.
Yeah, 21st century. Technology, resources, development, all this stuff.
It's so funny to think of that. Isn't that crazy to think
Damn.
about?
Yeah, damn. I'm just a caveman. We're all just cavemen. Yeah,
We're all just trying to like create fire and draw on the walls.
yeah. Except for your fire is like your job and like
Your
the
claw
painting on the
dashboard.
wall. Yeah, yeah. And then the painting on the walls is just like your freaking just your Instagram. Yeah. Damn, it's kind of messed up.
It is, but it's kind of fun to think about. Like you can give yourself some of those like that little bit of leeway when you kind of like have that and make fun of it to yourself. You're like, oh, I'm basically just a caveman. That's why I'm like making these errors. Like give myself some slack, look at it, and try to improve. Let's see if I can
Mm-hmm.
get to like the age of diesel. So
Yeah,
I can
the age
so
of
I can
diesel.
so I can create the diesel engine and then somehow just end up in a river.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy.
Ugh.
Got time for one more short topic before we gotta wrap this guy up.
I would say so, yeah.
I think we
Let's
should go
get
over. I think the last one we wrote down. I feel like that's pretty pertinent to.
I think so.
Yeah,
So obviously, for anyone who has been watching and has been listening, first off, we love you. Second, you guys may notice, like we had mentioned at the start, we're both in hotel rooms. We are both traveling right now, and traveling within a lot of sports, baseball specifically, and towards the end of our season for track and field, plays a large role on training on the road for competitions. Because it's not like, hey, we're going up the day before, we already lifted, we're gonna go play a football game, we'll come home that night, whatever it is. Like we're here for a couple of days. How do you train? How do you prepare through this and to kind of like keep moving forward? I think like adaptability. I want to set the table here, like the adaptability in training and what you need to get done to accomplish what you need to do to also continuously go forward versus like, okay, well, we're just never going to train on the road and we'll just go play the games. Like you can't do that. Um, that piece of the puzzle is such a difficult one because A, it's unpredictable, and B, you don't necessarily always know what you need to plan for. So my big thing will be approaching the problem. How do you approach it? What does it typically look like for you? And then what would be like the advice that you have to somebody when they have to approach that problem, maybe for the first time?
Yeah, there's no easy. It's tough, and I think
I'm here.
it's a little bit. It's a little bit different because like I think for players and coaches, like obviously it's a little bit easier to get used to it in baseball because like you do it so much and you just
Yeah.
kind of get used to like spending 6 days in one spot and then go back home and 6 days in another spot, go back home. Maybe you have a 2 week, like a true like 2 week like road stint. So that's something that like just you have to be able to get like in like a routine quickly. Like you have to learn to be able to like, okay, like you're in a hotel room, get in a routine. um I think the training is like a lot of it is like working with what you have. Some of
Hmm.
the visiting weight rooms that we've been around, like some of the visiting weight rooms I've seen have been pretty solid and we can do damn near everything that we want to do versus others are quite the opposite of that. So we'll have to take a lot of equipment with us in order to get, what we want to do. And we still might not be able to get, everything in. So I think for me is like you have your program. Everyone knows that like obviously like what you write down on the sheet of paper or in the spreadsheet oftentimes isn't actually what gets executed. So I think like knowing alternative exercises that's going to get, the main thing is like you're getting the same stimulus, whatever stimulus like you're trying to get out of that exercise. Ideally you can get it within like a very like similar pattern or similar mode, but are you going to get the same thing out of it, physiologically that you were if you hadn't have had to change your plan. So I think I've had to get, a lot better at that. Um, Getting resourceful with like what, you have, if you don't have a pull-up bar, okay, you can do pull-ups on the edge of a dugout. May not be the most ideal. Um, like there's certain things you can travel with that don't take up a lot of space and you can like an iso squat, like iso belt, like isometric pull platform is like something we just like kind of like travel with. Something that one, it's isometric, so you're not getting a ton of eccentric stress. You can get a high amount of force output. It's relatively easy to use. It's low skill. That's something we travel with. A lot of times we may have a squat rack, we may not have a squat rack. Is it like ideal to not have a squat rack? No, certainly not. But there's other things we can do to kind of supplement with that. Um, I think it's that, and like you have to adhere to the schedule too. Like if you luckily some places you play the game at the same time every day, so the schedule is like somewhat regular versus like other
Hmm.
plays like when we're at home we kind of play various different times. So one, the sleep schedules get a little bit messed up and the schedules, one day you may be there from noon to 11 p.m. and then other days, if we're playing a day game, you might be there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So it's a lot different. You may be there like the same amount of time, but it's a different part of the time of day. And you might have a game where you play a night game and then have a quick turnaround and play a day game. So I think on the coach, it's always about like being able to think on your feet, substitute like exercises, and then kind of like know. Luckily, we usually like know ahead of time. Okay, what are we working with? That way, we know like what we need to take with us,
Hmm.
and then just kind of like substituting like exercises and knowing like what those swaps are, so you can kind of make them on the fly. You're not holding people up and taking forever, because contrary to I think popular belief, or at least like kind of like what I thought, I was in college, I always thought like, oh, like damn, like the biggest constraint is time. I think in college is like you're
Yeah.
obviously having to deal with the academic schedule, but like time is always a constraint no matter where you go. Like, you still have 24 hours in the day no matter where you're at, and like obviously you're not having to deal with like academic schedule when you're talking about pro, but you still don't want to have guys at the field for 12 hours a
Eight
day. You
hours.
don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't like well, there's no recovery happening if that's the case. And you need to be able
Here's
to do
our
it 100.
3-hour recovery block I want you to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the point? You defeated the purpose. So I think
Yeah.
it's obviously like anything. Like if you have an athlete, like in how many times you had an athlete that's like, oh, this is feeling pretty banged up, and you have to make a switch real quick in the middle of a session.
Mm-hmm.
It's that just on like a different scale because you're dealing with. Imagine if like every week you came into work and your weight room looked different. Like I took
What
three.
would you do?
Yeah, like if I took all the racks out one week, or if I took your dumbbells out, or if all of a sudden you had a belt squat one week and then you didn't have a belt squat. You had your back extension reverse hyper and then all of a sudden you didn't. So imagine it being like that, and just like I think it's something that just has to be done. Like you get it with reps, like anything.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really like experience. You can't really like know how to do it until you actually have to do it. And then, like I said, like every week may look a little bit something different. And then it's also, I think, like planning ahead. Like if you know you're going to go to a place with like a shitty weight room setup, okay, you might want to plan that week ahead as like a deload, or like kind of like a back off week. So like, okay, we're not going to have a ton of equipment. The space is really small. Guys probably aren't going to want to like the motivation to train probably isn't going to be there as much. Okay, we're 6 weeks into the season. This is probably like perfect time to do somewhat of a deload, or like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like I know this, like next week we're going to a place that has this set of equipment. Okay, I can kind of program that. Or okay, is there going to be like an alternative that I can use for this set of exercises to get the same stimulus? If not, maybe that affects like how I program. And then recovery is obviously like that's something that's, I'd say, like more on the athletes. It's tough with travel schedules, and it's not even. It's lucky because we'll be on the road for, at least we'll be in the same spot for almost a week at a time. Versus like if you go like Major League Baseball, they're playing 3-game series and then they go somewhere else. 3-game series, go somewhere else. 3-game series, go home. You may have like an extended homestand or something like that, or like in the NBA where it's like you may play one night here and then one night there. Like it's a lot more difficult. So I think the biggest thing is that I found is like the travel day. So typically like you travel one day and the flight ends up being, whether it's a bus, like a long bus ride, obviously like affects recovery. Even if it's a sleeper bus and you're trying to sleep, the sleep is not going to be of the same quality. You get there super late. That affects it. Or like oftentimes if you have if you're flying, you have like an early flight. I've seen people make this mistake, and like I tell them, and at the end of the day, it's their choice. Like, well, we may fly in super early fly in. Guys are super tired because they had to get up really early, so they're like, oh, I'm gonna go to sleep, take a 5-hour nap, wake up, but then it's almost dinner time, and then you can't sleep, and then you feel like worse on the next day when you actually have to play. And the part of that's like a planning issue. Like, okay, can we get a better flight? But like sometimes, you just can't. You're flying out of smaller airports. Maybe there's not direct flights, this and that. So I think for coaches, the biggest thing is like obviously being able to adapt on the fly and knowing like how to like swap out, and then also like adjusting like volume and intensity from that too. Obviously like travel is just another stressor. So you have to be willing to kind of like, whether it's back off or maybe you're going to go, less intensity, or swap exercises based on like how that person's been feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the biggest things for me. And then obviously there's recovery habits that every athlete probably should have. Whether they do those things or not is kind of up to them, but you at least have to like give them that information, and be willing to give them a solution if they do have a problem. And then obviously like doing everything you can with what you have. That's my long-winded answer.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it a little more brief because you already covered so much of it. Um, my like kind of checklist is understand where you're going, understand what you might need to train. Like for me, we our throws coach is also like our DevOps. She reached out to Kentucky, hey, is there times that we can lift, etc. We had a practice track to train at. So that was like the big thing. And then, bring stuff that you may have as an option. So like during this period, we're doing a little bit more ISOs. We don't have an ISO platform because we're not the Cubs. But, what we do have is we have moving straps. And that was already like a thing that we had purchased because we had plans to utilize some of those like on the field. So there's 3 positions. They don't have to hold anything. They step in, they pull against it. I was like, okay, we have this as an option now. All right. And then I kind of go through of like, okay, well, I know I want to get some like barbell CMJs. I have VBT units. I'm going to bring that just so I can track that and be able to have that. Plug and play with a couple items. And then I had a couple options of, I know it's a P4 weight room, but I also don't know the staff. So they might have a priority of different equipment. So it was like I have like a banded option, like a glute ham roller option, a hamstring roller option, etc. And it's like I know what I want to get done. I know how much of each one I would need to get done, and then I just plug and play, like you had said. And it becomes less of we're gonna do front rack reverse lunge, and then we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this. It's like we're gonna do this movement, kind of quality in a sense. I'm going to do a asymmetrical unilateral squat or hinge or whatever it is. And like, I'm just going to plug that in and play. My sets and reps don't have to change greatly unless it's, I only have a dumbbell. Then it's like, well, now I want to kind of like change the speed at the movement, make it less of like a strength based thing and just being adaptable. I think that's like the biggest thing that will lead to your success when you're on the road is like having adaptability within the training, within the day, and just being able to be fluid. So like the people who kind of like live in chaos will thrive in these situations because they're able to just be like, let's roll with the punches, let's keep it moving versus like letting, it's the same thing as we talked about like the morning step routine, which that clip kind of went off a little bit because people agree. Being adaptable and having the option to just be like, okay, well, we'll do this and this instead, and we'll kind of move around training and, we're going to get in late. We're going to have a 7-hour day travel day the day before. Like, let's make sure we get to bed the night early. We travel with an AT, thank God. So it's like the next day, like, let's get your soft tissue work, or if you have to get any work done, let's make sure you see them. We bring the boots, we bring etc. So it's like, okay, we can do this and do this and do this. Being adaptable, I think, is the number one quality. And anyone that has to travel for their team or their athletes, if you can't do that, you're not going to be in a great spot because there's so much unpredictability that you're just not going to be able to account for, which will make you more stringent on your environment that you have constantly. And I think that's why like people who have less and can do more are far more important and difference makers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's also you learn like real quickly like there's nothing special about any certain exercise. Like you can you have to think like the output over the exercise. Like the output is like what you want. There's nothing magical about a front squat or a back squat or a Zercher squat. What do you have? Like there's nothing magical about. So you have to kind of throw away that notion pretty quick, and like at the end of the day you realize like damn, like you can get a stimulus with damn near like with pretty much no equipment. Yeah. So like if you have something, like if you have nothing, and then if you have something that's kind of like bonus on top of that, and it just like I don't know, it forces you to like get creative. Like I can't tell you how many like Jimmy rig like setups like I've made, and maybe they're not the best, but like it forces you to kind of like get a little bit creative. Even though sometimes it's a little bit like sketchy. Right now we're working with squat rack with no catches, so got to go always have a spotter, 2 side spotters if possible, and that's what we got. But trust yourself and be able to adapt, and like at the end of the day, like you got to get it done. So
for sure.
Alrighty, wrap these bad boys up.
Let's wrap this up.
Yep, I'll let you rate. We already know this is a S tier
banger
drink.
It's a banger.
Frozen Bomb Skull. This is like one of DeMarco's favorites.
That's his go-to. It's that. It's the Rain Blue Raz, and then
Orange Cream Ghost. Is he still an Orange Cream Ghost type of guy?
He's more on the iced tea lemonade with us now.
Oh, the dark side. Let's go
to the dark side, and then Sour Gummy Worm Rain. That guy's gonna gas those 4 like regularly.
Yep.
Rain watermelon sour gummy. We love the Rain can. It's a textured can, which is cool. It's almost like it almost feels like grip tape. Not it obviously it's hard, but pause. Um, looks cool. Obviously the green top. Pricing. Rain is a very fairly priced 300 milligram energy drink. You'll see it between 250 to 369. Nice. Depending on whatever sale is, because they're always going to be on sale, 2 for 3, whatever it is, which is
2 for
fantastic.
$5.50, 2 for
Yeah.
6. Yeah.
I'm never going to complain about a high stem can being on sale. So more than likely, you're going to see it on sale at some point at one of the gas station stores, wherever it would be. So it makes it very approachable for people to get, wildly available. Formula isn't, it's not the best formula in the world, but it's very high stem and 300 milligrams of caffeine. A little bit of electrolytes, a couple of BCAAs, and then obviously you'll see the B6, B12, B3, the B vitamins in there, and then some CoQ10 in there. So very good formula. The taste, I think that's the biggest thing when we review a can or a drink that we've already reviewed that doesn't change the formula, but it's going to just change the flavor. It tastes like a Sour Patch Kids watermelon that got liquefied, right? But it tastes like a generic Sour Patch Kids that got liquefied. So it's not the exact flavor. It's still very good. I'm not a huge watermelon fan. I love like fresh watermelon, but I'm just not a huge like watermelon flavor kind
Watermelon
of person.
flavor.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a fruit punch nowadays where, in 2010 to 2018, fruit punch was everywhere. Fruit punch and blue raz. Everyone just did that. Now I feel like it's kind of switched. Now everyone does a watermelon flavor and then probably like a peach, to be honest.
Yeah.
Those are like the two like non-basic but overly produced flavors. Um, super solid. I would probably go with like a 7.4. It's very, very, very good. A 7.4 is a great score. This is something you can grab whenever you see it and you're like, that'll be good. Am I going to go search to find a case? Maybe once in a blue moon because I'm like, I just wanted to get a change up. But I think by the end of the case, you'll be like, let's get the sour gummy worm. Let's get a raspberry cream ghost. Let's get the black cherry vanilla. Let's get the iced tea lemonade. I think you'll kind of get sick of it unless you're one of those people that loves like a sherbet flavor or something like that. But I think this is better than like a sherbet flavor. I'm going 7.4.
Hell yeah. All right, there we have it, folks. As always, really appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're getting your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe or like the show, whatever platform you are on. Leave us a review. That really helps us just get into the algorithm. We love doing these episodes. Doesn't matter how busy we get, we seem to still make time
Make
for
it happen.
somehow. Yeah, I was gonna say we make it happen. So appreciate you guys with all the support. BetBoys.com if you do want to support the boys by buying some merch. BetBoys.tv on Instagram. Past, future, present clips of episodes. Our personal accounts are always associated with those posts if you want to check out more training type content, educational content. Yeah, we will see you in the next show. Peace.
Peace.